Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at round number 6 of Norway Chess, which is being held here in Stavanger, Norway. Now, yesterday I won my second game in a row against none other than the current world champion Ding Loren, but today we're back at it, and we start the second half of the tournament where I play the original 5 players who I already competed against, but with the colors reversed. So, in the 6th round, I am playing with the white piece against Fabiano Caruana, my countryman from the United States. Now, Fabiano has had a bit of a rough patch. He actually won a very, very nice game, I believe, against Alireza Firouzja, if I remember correctly. Maybe I've got it wrong. I do have it wrong. It was against Ding Loren. Sorry, you guys, but we will keep going with the recording. Fabiano won a very, very nice game against Ding Loren in the Gucci piano a couple of rounds ago. There was some speculation that Fabiano might even overtake Magnus Carlsen to become the new #1 player in the world, but he suffered a very tough loss against Magnus, and then he also lost against Pragnananta yesterday, meaning he had lost 2 games in a row. As such, when you combine those 2 losses with my 2 wins, I did overtake Fabiano temporarily as the new #1 American player in the world, but also the #2 player in the world to boot. So today we start round number 6, second half of the tournament begins, and let's jump right into the action. So the game starts with d4 now. To add some other context, you guys, I have actually beaten Fabiano in 4 classical games in a row, and if I win today, this will mean that I have adopted Fabiano with 5 wins in classical chess, which would simply be unbelievable. So I start with d4. Fabiano plays knight to f6, and those of you guys who are watching the video, you'll probably know that in all 4 of those games, I played a different first move. I played the move that the famous world chess champion Robert James Fischer thought was best, pawn to king 4, which he said best by test. Instead, I decided to play d4. Fabiano goes knight f6, c4, we get e6, knight c3, and bishop to b4. Again, I play e3, the same Nimzo Indian that I had against Prague a few rounds ago. Fabiano decides to play b6. I go knight g2. Fabiano plays bishop a6, and now I move this knight to g3. Now, the reasoning behind moving this knight to g3 is that I want to push e4 in the center. If black were to castle here and I get e4, suddenly I have the classic big white center with all these pawns in the center of the board, and I'm doing very well. So Fabi decides to trade the bishop for the horse, and now he goes d5. Now, what black is trying to do is play in the center as well with d5 and c5 to take some space, but also white currently has the bishop pair, or the 2 b's. Now, if I trade the pawns on d5 after, let's say, takes, and pawn takes pawn, position is very, very stable here. Black is going to follow up with a move like c5, knight bd7. Let's just show some sample moves, something like a4, castles, h3, and rook c8 here. And black should be completely fine, as both sides are contesting the center, but black has a rook on c8, the knight on f6, and the pawn on d5 prevent white from playing e4, and it's fairly balanced. So after Fabi plays d5, here I decide to play this move queen to f3 after a bit of a think. Now, the reason I took a little bit of time here to play the move queen to f3 is that the line that I looked at was castles, queen to f3, and d5 in this order. And so in the game, when Fabi played d5 right away, I took a little bit of time to make sure that queen f3 was still acceptable, and Fabi very quickly decided to castle, transposing back into this variation. Now, this is not something that I had reviewed before the game. Actually, the last time I looked at this line was prior to the fateful last round game I had in the candidates against none other than D. Gukesh from India. So here I took on d5, and now Fabiano played this move, bishop takes f1, instantly. Now, before the game against Gukesh, I looked at these moves, queen takes d5 or e takes d5, both of which are playable, and bishop takes f1 was simply not a move I had considered. Now, one of the reasons that I had not considered this move before the Gukesh game is that you have to remember, in that last round game against Gukesh, it was a must-win situation. It was a situation where a draw was not good enough, so if I had reached this position against Gukesh in the last round of the candidates, I almost for sure would have played the line that is very interesting with pawn takes pawn. Now, the reason this move makes sense is, first of all, if I capture the bishop and black takes back, material is even, very stable. But once I take the pawn on e6 here, the rook in the corner is under attack. The bishop on f1 is under attack as well. And if black plays a quiet move like c6, for example, I can simply take the bishop, and after takes and queen e2, let's do some counting. White has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. White has an extra pawn and should be winning. So that's why this would have been so exciting. But with Fabiano moving instantly, I simply was unsure what's going on. And the line that he mentioned that he was going to play is this move bishop to c4. Now, keep in mind, you guys, I'm using a weakchess.com engine here on my computer, so the valuation might show it as looking like it's winning for me. But according to the supercomputers, black is fine. And the line Fabiano intended to play is actually the best one, where he sacks the rook. He goes knight to d5 here, and after e4, black is this very strange looking move, pawn to a6, which does not hang the pawn on a7. Now, white is attacking the knight on d5 here, But after takes, bishop d5 and queen to a7, for example, black can take the pawn on e6, and black has a wooden shield with his bishop on d5 in the center of the board. White's queen is also kind of stuck on a7. One sample line is white castles here, and after queen c8, white is going to lose the queen because black's move will be this move knight c6. I can't go to f4 here because the rook covers the square. Now if I play bishop a3, rook f7, let's say I go c4, for example, black plays knight c6, queen guards all the critical squares here, my queen on a7 is trapped, and black is simply much better and probably will go on to win the game. So after a6, it's a big mess here. I don't know what's going on. I'm curious what the computer says is the best line. Maybe bishop to a3 here, but after rook to e8, it's simply a big mess. I have no idea what's happening. And in a situation like this, one thing that's very important to remember is that I am not playing this game against Fabiano Caruana here. I am playing against 3,500 rated Stockfish, or 3,800, or whatever its rating is. I'm not playing against my fellow human. So when that happens, you have to keep that in mind. And even if I think the position maybe is acceptable or I can play the position, it's simply too much because I'm not as good as Stockfish and I never will be. So why do I want to play against a computer as opposed to trying to play against my opponent? So that's why after a bit of a think, I play this move king takes f1, simply deciding to go for a very quiet line. Now, the computer thinks that I can also play knight takes f1, and after takes, something like knight to d2 here, followed by castles is fine. There's actually one point that I want to make, which is in my post-game interview with Fiona Stale-Antoni and Alex Astana on my Kick channel. They mentioned that I have this move knight g3, or wait, sorry. They mentioned that in the game after takes, for example, here, I could have played this move c4, c6, and this idea with h4, knight to f5, trying to attack on the king side, maybe some kind of rook lift. I don't know what's going on here, but this is something that I probably should have played in the Armageddon game. Spoiler unintended. So, the reason this could have been really exciting is after takes here, maybe there's h5, followed by rook h3, knight f5, and rook g3. And if black plays knight d7, you get knight f5, rook to e8, for example, here. Now maybe there's queen g3, maybe there's rook h4 with e4, g4. And it's just a very, very fresh position with a lot of play for the player with the white pieces. But of course, not knowing that that was possible in the game, there's no way I'm going to do this. And in fact, when I took here with the king on f1, I knew Fabi would play pawn takes pawn. And at this point, I was simply ready to simplify the game and make a draw, which is why I chose to play this move e4. Fabi trades on e4. He trades the horses. He plays knight to d7. Now black guards the rook. And at this point, I play the move queen f3. Fabi plays c5, and now I go bishop to e3. Very important move, by the way, because if I play g3, trying to finish the development of my king, black can maybe claim a small advantage after trade and knight to f6, because I have the isolated pawn. Let's say bishop e3, knight d5, king g2, and queen d7, followed by rook c8, and I think black is better because the bishop is guarding a pawn. There simply are no targets at all for this wooden shield, and I think if anything, black probably will win the game. In fact, I think if I had this position against Magnus, I would probably lose with the white pieces. So, after c5, I go bishop e3 here. Fabiano trades the pawns on d4. Important move, by the way, because if black plays a quiet move like h6, now I can always take on c5. And if he takes, after g3 and king g2, I'm fine. If he takes with a knight, I just chop, go g3. And in this position, both sides have their pawns on the same files here, and there's simply no play, and the game will be a draw. So, Fabi trades on d4. Of course, I take with the bishop, creating the classic wooden shield here with the bishop on d4. Fabiano goes rook e8, and now I play the move g3, trying to finish my development with king to g2. We get knight f8, king g2, knight e6, and now I play this move rook he1, trying to force an endgame. Now, the reason I played rook e1 is that there was a line I calculated, but if I play rook d1 guarding this bishop on d4, after queen c7 and rook to c8 here, let's just say h4, rook c8, rook e1, something like queen c4, I have these two weaknesses on c3 and a2. And even though it's probably still a draw, if anything, I would rather be playing with the black pieces. So I go rook e1, and now Fabiano decides to take this free pawn on d4. Maybe not necessary. Black still could play queen e7, but here my plan was to go rook e5, followed by rook e1, creating the classic double stack on the e file, and I simply don't see why black should be better at all. So Fabiano takes, I take back, he plays queen takes pawn, and now I go rook to e7, creating the classic kebab on the 7th rank with the rook targeting everything. Now here Fabi has to play the move queen to f6, because if black were to play a move like queen takes rook, looking like a free rook, it's oh spaghetti-o, I take on f7, and after king h8, I do not take this pawn on g7, which is guarded, but I sack the queen, and after takes, we have the classic ice skater checkmate, with the king being stuck in the corner. Also, if Fabi were to play a move like queen c4, guarding the pawn, after rook to c1 here, white is actually winning the game, because again, if you take, you lose the pawn, and after queen takes a2, I can now go rook c to e1, creating the double stack and pressuring the rook, and if black goes rook f8, I sack the queen, and we have another standard checkmate here with rook takes rook, and the king gets stuck behind the pawns. And if black goes king to f8, which is the other move here, I can now play the move queen to e4, creating the legendary triple stack. There are all kinds of threats on multiple diagonals, and white is simply winning the game. So Fabi goes queen f6 here. I trade the queens, and now I go rook b7. And you'll notice that the dust has settled. We're in an endgame where black has one extra pawn on b6, but two of his pawns on f7 and f6 are stacked. And more importantly, he can't really push these pawns on the queen side because the rook will gobble one of them. So Fabi plays rook e2, I go a4, rook e4, play a5, chop chop, he plays a6, and now I play his move f4. Now the reason I played f4 here is simply because if I play a move like h4, black can go rook to e5, trying to trade the rooks, and after rook a4 and a5, it's probably still a draw, but the pawn is one square further up the board here, and I simply don't want to allow that if I can help it. So that's why I go f4 to stop black from playing rook to e5. Fabiano plays king g7, king f3, we get rook e8, king g4, and now he decides to play the move rook e8, effectively forcing a draw here, because if black doesn't force a draw, if anybody's better, it's probably white here, for example. So we get rook here, h4, rook here, and h5. Now their idea is like h6 to go after the pawn, and at some point, black is probably going to have to trade the rooks and give up this extra pawn on a6. So Fabi plays rook b8, we trade, and now the game ends in a draw. Both players have made their 30th moves here. I could have played rook takes pawn, but after rook to b5 here, unlike in the Ali Reza game against Magnus, where Magnus had the same structure, 3 versus 2, black has these pawns on top of each other, which means 3 equals 3, and the game will be a draw very, very soon. So, after rook takes rook, the first game ends in a draw. It ends my 4-game winning streak against Fabiano with the white pieces in classical chess. Unfortunately, that means I don't get the mixed option, but nonetheless, it's still a pretty solid result as Fabiano is currently a higher rank than me, and I gain a few points for the draw. So, what does this mean? As usual, we move to the classic Armageddon, where I'm playing with the white pieces once again, and I have 10 minutes against Fabiano, 7 minutes. Both of us are insured 1 point, and the winner of the Armageddon game gets the remaining half point. Now, if I win the game, I get that half point. It's a draw, or Fabiano wins, he gets the extra half point, but I do have 3 extra minutes. So, again, we get the same opening with this Nimzo Indian here. Now, one thing that I will say about this, I actually thought Fabiano would change it up and play a different variation. We only have about 10 to 12 minutes before the game start. So, because of that, you don't really have a lot of time to review. And I simply did not expect Fabiano to play this. So, the idea that I came up with in the game was probably not correct. So we get the same position here after d5. This time I take right away. Now, as I mentioned in regards to the previous game, if I had seen this idea with takes, king f1 takes, and c4, c6, h4, I almost certainly would have played this in our Armageddon game, but it was not an idea that I was aware of. So the idea that I went for instead was to play this move pawn takes pawn, get the trade, I take with the rook, Fabi captures the queen, and now I play f3 here, intending to go e4 and build this big white center with all of these pawns. Now, this is completely reasonable to play, but already here, I'd rather be black for the simple fact that in a situation where black only needs a draw here, we get this line with queen e2, knight e5, e4, queen c4, and queens are coming off the board, but on top of queens coming off the board and being in a middle game, there are 2 other big factors that make this opening choice simply a mistake. First of all, Fabiano has not had to use much time. He's only had to use 30 seconds to blitz out these first 12 moves, so he's getting to an end game. He's getting 15 moves very easily where he doesn't have to burn a lot of clock, and even beyond that, I would argue that in this position, it's a little bit easier for black to play because black wants to play for c5 or b5 here, and white is the one who has to figure out how you use this central pawn majority or this big white center to get an advantage. So I play bishop g5 here, knight d7, king e2, Fabi castles, and now I play this move rook b1. Now already here I would argue that this opening has been a complete bust because if I play the move king to d3, which is one option, black can play knight b2 or b5 here, and he's completely fine. And with his knight stuck on c4, what we call a classic bastion here, black cannot be worse. So I play rook b1 here, and now Fabi plays a6, which is an excellent move that I simply overlooked. Now, actually, I didn't overlook a6 itself, but I just overlooked that black could play his b5 move on the next turn. And already here, I would argue that it's very, very hard to create anything substantial. So here I go rook d1, Fabi plays b5, and already here, as soon as he played b5, I knew that I was not going to win this game, because I'm already only up 2.5 minutes, but once again, the moves for Fabiano are too easy. He can still play for c5, or he can go knight b6, knight a4 to go after the pawn on c3, or even f6 or f5 here. And with all these ideas, it's more on me with the white piece to try and create something, and it's very, very difficult. So here I go d5, which is not a good move. Probably I should have played knight f1, but already here after knight b6, let's say knight e3, takes, knight c4, bishop f4, and c6. I'm probably not worse here in this position. I can just simply wait with like g4, bishop g3, or something. But I'm also not better because this knight is permanently anchored on the c4 square. So I decide to play the move d5. Fabi plays knight b6. I trade, and here I play this move king e1, which is simply a bad move. But at this point, I'm already only up 1 minute on the clock, and it's very tough to play. Now, I probably should have played knight f1, but here black can go knight a4, and these knights are really, really active on the queen side. After rook d c1 and h6, let's say I go bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, and something like c5 here. It's very hard to see why black should ever be worse, and honestly, black's moves are too easy. He can play rook d8, knight b6, just no issues whatsoever. So I played king e1 here. This is a bit of a panic move just to try and get Fabiano to think and try to build some kind of advantage on the clock. He plays h6, bishop c1, not knight a4, sorry, goes rook d8 first, f4, and now he plays knight a4, going after his pawn on c3. Here I play knight e2, knight c5, knight g3, and Fabi correctly plays this move knight a4. Now, I was really hoping they would use like a minute and try to win the game with knight d3 right away, but unfortunately, he plays a very practical move, knight to a4, because we know that in Armageddon, a draw equals a black win. So I go knight e2, knight c5, and now I play this move e5. Obviously, if this were a classical game, I would have played knight g3 and made a draw. But alas, in Armageddon, you gotta do what you gotta do. So I go e5, Fabi checks, king f1, he goes c5 here, taking away the square from the knight on d4. I go king g1, rook d5, now I play rook f1, he trades the knight for the bishop, and he goes rook to d2. Here I play the move knight g3, and we get this move rook a2, and now I go knight to e4, putting pressure on the pawn on c5. Now, already here, I knew that I was still in a lot of trouble, but I started to have some faint glimmers of hope that maybe I could get some swindle, because here at least I've got these pawns in the center, the knight can target the pawn on c5, and maybe if I have a miracle here, I can actually push for g4 and f5 down the road. So Fabi goes knight e3, which is actually a move that I thought was really, really good from a practical standpoint, even if it's not the best computer move. Because after rook f2, we get the swap, knight c4 back, I go king g3. Not g3, by the way, which is playable, because here after knight takes e5, let's say knight c5, and g5 here, black is never going to lose this position, and it will be a draw. So I go king g3, only move to guard the pawn at f4 and e5. Fabi plays rook c8, I go rook b1, and now he goes knight to e3. And this is another excellent move from Fabiano. It's not the absolute best move, but it's very practical because after rook to c6 and king to f2, for example, black struggles to push the pawns on the queen side. If you go a5, you lose the pawn on b5. If you go b4, I just win the pawn back here, and white is better. So you can't really go a5, you can't go b4, and if you go rook b6, you hang the pawn on c5. So even though black has a 3 versus 1 majority on the queen side, it's very, very hard to get these pawns rolling. So Fabi plays knight e3, king f3, and now he plays knight d5. Here I go rook to a1. I could have played the move c4 here, and after takes and rook c1, I'm probably drawing this game, but after c3, for example, takes, and something like a5, a4, c4, I'm still down a pawn, and I'm never winning this position. So I go rook a1, Fabi plays rook c6, now I go g4, desperately trying to launch my pawns on the king side, and here Fabi plays c4, I go f5, and now he plays another excellent move, b4, simply forcing me to make a decision here, because after I take on b4 and he goes c3, black's a pass pawn with the rook behind the pawn, and at this point, black is simply close to winning. Now, I don't really have many options here. I could take on e6, and maybe after rook takes e6, takes, rook e5, rook a6. I'm still probably going to draw this position after checking rook c8, but as we know, a draw is not good enough. So I take, Fabi goes c3 here, and now I play this move b5, hoping for a miracle, because after pawn takes, I throw in the check, we get king h7, and now I play this move knight d6. And here Fabiano plays the best move, I think best move in the position. Maybe it's not the only one that wins, but he plays this move knight b6. Now, what I was hoping for here was hoping that Fabi would be like, oh wait, I can go c2 here. I can push p up the board with the rook behind the pawn and win the game. But now I thought I had knight to f7 here, threatening to create a checkmate, although black here, oh, black can simply go g5, which I didn't see at all. Basically, what I saw here was a black queens. I go rook h8 mate, king has no square. If he goes check, king f2. Again, no checks available, and it looks like I'm mating. Additionally, if black plays g6 here, I thought I had f6, threatening mate, but even here, I guess there's g5, and black is still winning. So actually, knight b6 wasn't necessary here from Fabi, but nonetheless, in this position, he plays knight b6. I don't blame him. Obviously, knight f7 and rook h8 looks very, very scary. Now I go rook e8. He plays c2, knight f7, and here Fabiano plays the best move, rook to c8, stopping the checkmate on h8. Here, the knight guards the rook, and now black is going to queen the pawn on the next turn, and there's simply nothing I can do here, so I decide to resign the game. So, a little bit unfortunate in terms of the Armageddon game to lose the way that I lost. I would say the result in Armageddon, not a big deal to me, but I really do wish I had picked a slightly different variation because I never really felt like I was in this game with a chance to win it. So it's a little bit disappointing from that standpoint, but overall, I still get 1 point out of a possible 3 points. I lose to Armageddon. Now, I have not looked to see whether Magnus Carlsen is going to win his game against Ding Loren, the current world champion. Looked very promising last time I saw it, but nonetheless, the game goes on. If Magnus wins that game, that means that he leapfrogs me and takes the lead headed into our showdown tomorrow in the 7th round here in Norway Chess. If he does not win in Classical, I think that means that I should still have the lead, but regardless, it's going to be a big day, as in the 7th round, I will meet probably the leader or the person right behind me in the 5-time world champion Magnus Carlsen. Now, in the second game against him, I will have the white pieces, so it should be pretty exciting to see what happens. But at any rate, that's going to be it for right now. I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the 6th round of Norway Chess being held here in Stavanger. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and I will be back tomorrow after my critical 7th round matchup in Norway Chess here against the 5-time world chess champion Magnus Carlsen. See you guys soon. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.